Hey guys, this is Math 172. We're doing review problems for the final exam. The first thing we're going to talk about is graphing sinusoidal functions. There are always four parameters, A, B, C, and D. A is the amplitude, which basically tells you from the midpoint to the max or the midpoint to the minimum. You can take the maximum minus the minimum and divide by 2 and get the amplitude. B, it tells you 2 pi over the period. Remember, period is the time it takes for one repetition. C tells you if you don't start exactly at the midpoint or at the maximum or at the minimum, you're kind of shifting the function in X. And so that's where that comes in. And D is the vertical offset. So the first thing that we're going to talk is problem 4a, which is y equals 3 sine of 4 pi x. So immediately we see that there's no phase shift and no vertical offset, and we can just go from there. This coefficient here, a, is the amplitude, so you know the maximum will be 3 above the midpoint, the minimum will be 3 below the midpoint. 4 pi is our b, that's equal to 2 pi over the period. And moving right along, if we do a little bit of math, so 4 pi is 2 pi over the period, so we cross multiply, and you get 2 pi is 4 pi p. So if you divide by 4 pi, you see that p, the period, is 1/2. So we're going to get an entire repetition in 1/2. So the next thing, come over here and work out these 5 points. So when x is 0, we have 3 times the sine of 0. 3 times 0 gives us 0. When x is 1, and then I went to x equals 1/2, which will give us a 0, and then you interpolate these 3 points in between. If the period is 1/2, half a period will be 1/4, and half of that is 1/8, and the midpoint here is 3/8. So when you plug this in, x equals 1/8, this is 4 pi times 1/8, which gives you pi by 2. And the sine of pi by 2 is 1. When you multiply that, you get 3. So at these values, you've got 0, 3, 0, negative 3, 0. And so we can just graph that. 0, 3, 0, negative 3, 0. That the amplitude, again, is from the midpoint up, and then, or the midpoint down, it gives you 3. And this period is the amount of time or the amount of x it takes to get an entire repetition. So guys, this is problem 4 on the Math 172 final review.